Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raja Reddy here, Head of Marketing from Servier. Those of you who were there yesterday, thank you for rejoining. And those of you who have joined in for the first time, welcome to this outstanding program, continuous medical education efforts to improve the knowledge level of practicing pharmacists in the country. This first 5 minutes, I would like to introduce what all my company is about. Some of you must have heard about Servier, some may not know. Servier is an international pharmaceutical company, and we are governed by a non-profit foundation. And we are one among the companies which are governed by a non-profit. It doesn't mean that we are in business. It doesn't mean that we are not looking for profit, but we are looking for profit. But the profit earned out of Servier does not belong to any individuals because they are no shareholders. We are not in the stock market. Neither does it go to any other people. The entire money is reinvested back into research. If you are wondering why such a structure, Dr. Servier, our founder, believed that the profits earned out of treating patients should not belong to individuals, but rather either doctors or people who are in pharmaceutical business alleviating patients' problems. That is the reason why when he was passing away, he established a non-profit foundation. Today, there are more than 100 million patients who are treated with our medicines worldwide. They take it every day. In India, we are a small company, but globally, in Europe, we are second in cardiology, fifth worldwide in cardiology. The other unique thing, what you will observe, unlike other pharmaceutical companies, because they are shareholder driven companies, they can invest maximum of 10% up to their total. I mean, some of the companies invest up to 10% of their net profit. Servier, because of its non-profit foundation, invests up to 25% of the total turnover in research. This allows us to pursue research questions even when our products have lost patent. Take an example of one of the landmark studies done with one of our products called Natrelix SR, indapamide. Even when the patent is lost, we pursued the HIVET study along with Imperial College London, where we have invested more than 180 million euros to find out, giving antihypertensive medications to patients above 80 years, will it result in any use? What does Serdia support for? Serdia, the first three letters are Dr. Servier's name, and the last three letters belong to India. Serdia. Brands produced in India. Even before the Make in India program was officially initiated, Serdia was always producing brands in India. There is no Chinese API. The raw material is sourced from a single factory according to EMEA standards. So Dr. Servier believed whatever at the end of the day the patient could pay, he wanted a strict control on quality. So despite the fact a drug could be available at different prices across the globe, all of them, the raw material was imported from a single factory. This is the only slide probably you see of our marketed drugs. But there is one more unique thing. Whatever picture you would see here, for example, take Triplexam. That's the same Triplexam across the globe. Why am I insisting on this? A lot of times you find companies are manufacturing India-specific product or South Asia-specific products which are not available for international patients. But in our case, it is not so. Our policy is simple. A drug which can be taken in India should be taken in UK, should be taken in France, depending on the regulations, of course. And this is the only slide you will see. And among all the products, all of the products are manufactured in India, except for Corolon. It is imported from a single factory. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who are in the front line fighting the COVID crisis, COVID virus. You have selflessly stood when everything else was closed down. Probably the pharmacy shops and the pharmacists, along with the HCPs, were the only people who were available outside. Whatever we are today, I would say in a healthy state, it's thanks to you people out there. I also take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Guru Prasad Mohanta, who's the moderator for today's session. He is the former professor and head of Annamalai University, former National Technical Officer, WHO Country Office for India, 33 years more teaching experience, 2 years as National Technical Officer, expert member, Administrative Ethics Group, Federation of Asian Pharmaceuticals, member of National Level Advisory Committee for Engaging Community Pharmacists. He is the Vice President, Community Pharmacy Division of Indian Pharmaceutical Association. With a very rich experience, he is available for us today to take us through this next 1 hour, to introduce the speakers, to talk about the topic. Sir, Dr. Guru Prasad, thank you very much for agreeing to moderate the session today. So from here, I request you to take over. Sami, can you upload the slides for today, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. So nice of you having introduced me to the audience today. Friends, there is a say, live as if you are going to die tomorrow. Learn as if you are going to live forever. And we are for this cause. Second one, that we continue learning, and one of the criteria of a good pharmacist is a pharmacist is a continuing learner. There are 8 characteristics, and one of the characteristic is continuing learner. I appreciate the surveyor for coming forward to promote the cause of continuing education. In other words, I say continuing professional development for the practicing pharmacist. So I welcome the 2 speakers of today. First, we have Dr. Pankaj Jain. Pankaj Jain is a pharmacy qualified professional with a PhD degree, and is with a consultancy firm, deals with the pharmacovigilance. Comparatively, pharmacovigilance is a new terminology in medical science. I don't say just the pharmaceutical science, in medical science. And the word is first coined, I believe, somewhere around 2000, early 2000. Before that, the word was not there, pharmacovigilance. Friends, one thing I really appreciate, that the adverse drug reaction, most of the time these adverse drug reactions, people ignore it because people believe if drugs are approved, means they are safe. But this is not the truth. And that is why the pharmacovigilance or the science of adverse drug monitoring has evolved as a priority science. And not only that, some of you will be at least appreciate that the government of India has made it mandatory, the pharmacovigilance activity for every marketing authorization holder. So great opportunity, and it is good that we must learn about the adverse drug reaction. And not only it helps us improving the safety of the patient, it improves the overall our reliance on medicine. If we believe that medicines are thoroughly tested and we are monitoring, and we'll be able to avoid the harms that happens to the patient. And once it happens to the patient, sometimes it percolates to the other healthcare professionals who deal with this. This is our first topic. Next, we have Professor Sadhana from again, of course, she is working here, but our Dr. Pankaj qualified from this institute, Institute of Chemical Technology, a premier institute in the country. Madam is with vast experience of almost of 3 decades, a good communicator and a good researcher. So he has a lot of publications he has also. And some of our colleagues probably I know in ICT, but somehow we have not met Madam earlier. Today we are meeting. So I welcome both the speakers for today's program. So I first call upon Dr. Pankaj Jain to make his presentation.
Sure, Mohanta. Thank you so much, Mohanta, for introducing me. Thank you so much. So, hello. Am I audible to everyone? I hope I am.
You are audible at least to me.
Okay, thank you so much. So, let me share my screen. Okay, so I hope the screen is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. Hi, this is Dr. Pankaj Jain. Hope everybody is doing fit and fine. And I'm working as a senior safety expert in the PV industry. So I will walk you through today through adverse drug reaction, its identification and its reporting. So adverse drug reactions. So basically something which was really not desired from the drug. So drug which was actually given for a beneficial effect, and it gave some undesired effect which was actually not expected. That is an adverse drug reaction.
Hello, sir.
So
Click on
the
the hide
agenda
button.
Sorry.
Click on the hide.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you. So the agenda for today would be I would give you a little background and about introduction on the ADR. What is the classification? Then role of ADRs in drug discovery. Then reporting of ADRs across different countries, and what are the different safety reports that are being submitted to the various health authorities. So if you see the incidence of adverse drug reactions, so there are different figures published across. So this is an average representative figure, wherein in case of hospital inpatients, there are about 10 to 20% of people who suffer an adverse drug reaction. Then the deaths that occur as a consequence of adverse drug reaction is about 0.24 to 2.9%. Then the hospital admissions, 0.3 to 5% of hospital admissions are due to adverse drug reactions. So although this percentage is a little, it's on the lower side, but it has a drastic impact on approvals, on withdrawal status, etc. So if we see the lessons learned from history, there was an sulfanilamide tragedy that occurred in 1937, wherein 107 people died of taking this elixir. So sulfanilamide was actually used for streptococcal infections, but and it was available in the form of powder and tablets, and there was a demand of it to be produced in the form of a liquid dosage form. So that is why a solvent, that is diethyl glycol, was used, and it caused a significant impact. Due to ADRs, people died, that is 107 people died. And this led to establishment of FDA creating some stringent rules of about inquiring into the safety of new drugs before allowing them to the market. The next, most famous, I can say, the thalidomide incident. Thalidomide, which was actually given for motion sickness, and it caused fetal abnormalities, that is aplastic limb deformities and all, and phocomelia, that is, and it really caused a drastic impact on monitoring of adverse drug reactions. And this actually led to a great and increased awareness of the adverse effect of the drugs and methods of detecting them at various stages of drug discovery. Then coming to the drug withdrawals that have occurred due to adverse drug reactions. So these are the different brand names and drugs which have been withdrawn. For, let's say, for example, Serivastatin, which is a lipid lowering drug, which was withdrawn due to risk of rhabdomyolysis. Then Rofecoxib, which is an NSAIDs, which was withdrawn due to a risk of myocardial infarction, and so on. So like Cisapride, this was again withdrawn in many countries due to risk of cardiac arrhythmias. So if you see, there is a great impact of this adverse drug reaction, which can cause withdrawal of a particular drug, and it can create like huge economic loss. So that is why adverse drug reaction and its monitoring plays a pivotal role in the roadmap of drug discovery. Then coming to pharmacovigilance. So pharmacovigilance is nothing but pharmaco means a drug, and vigilance is to keep a watch on. So keeping a watch on the drug and its safety profile is an ultimate objective of pharmacovigilance. So it's nothing but it is collection, detection, assessment, understanding and prevention of adverse effect is ultimate goal of pharmacovigilance, and it is useful in educating doctors and official regulation of the drug use, and plays an important role in rational use of medicines. So if you see the objectives of pharmacovigilance, so the objectives being, first is to ensure the patient safety. Ultimately it comes to patient, and it is very important that the patient, whenever he takes a drug, there is a safety profile that is being monitored. Then you have an early detection of the unknown safety problems. Then detection of increase in the frequency of certain areas which are associated with the drugs. In identification of the risk factors that might be due to either drug-drug interaction or might be due to some age-related factors, etc. Then quantifying the risks associated with the drug. Then again, risk is ultimately it is the benefit risk profile of a particular drug that is important for the ADR. Then preventing the patients from being affected unnecessarily. So ultimately, we need to monitor this adverse drug reaction to ensure the patient safety and also the safety and efficacy of drugs. Then coming to the adverse drug reaction. So simply adverse means which is undesired, untoward, unintended, which possibly causes harm. Adverse event is an adverse event, or it's an effect or an experience. Adverse drug event, that is an adverse event which happens in the patient taking drug. And adverse drug reaction, it's an adverse event in which a causal relationship is suspected between the drug and event. Maybe it will be more clarified subsequently. So if you see the adverse event, So adverse event is a very generic term. It's a broad term. So anything which was untoward medical occurrence that has been presented due to the pharmaceutical product or the treatment, which might or may not have a causal relationship with the drug. So causal relationship is it might happen because of the drug, or it might not happen because of the drug. So there is not a necessity that it is because of the drug. So adverse event is the generic term, and it may or may not be because of the drug. So it might be undesirable signs and symptoms, disease or accidents, abnormal lab findings leading to dose reduction, discontinuation, or intervention. Then coming to the side effects. So side effect is any unintended effect of pharmaceutical product that occurs at doses which is normally taken in man, and it is related to the pharmacological properties of the drug. So that is side effect. And adverse drug reaction, it's an untoward and noxious change which is suspected and which is due to the drug. So it has a causal relationship to the drug, and that is why it is it is because of the relationship with the drug, and that is why adverse drug reaction is always has a causal link to the drug. So in the layman term, side effects is a very layman term, which is, you can say, synonymous word which has been used in the layman, that is side effect, which is technically called as adverse drug reaction. So if you see this chart, you can see that adverse event and adverse drug reaction. So adverse drug reaction, it always has a causal relationship, is always suspected and established. And adverse event, there no need to have a causal relationship. It may or may not be because of the drug. So adverse drug reaction is a subset of adverse event. So some basic terminologies which are being associated with adverse drug reaction. So if you say expectedness, so expectedness means the adverse drug reaction, which might be serious or not, it is already listed in the investigator brochure or the summary of product characteristics. So every drug has a SNPC, or drug which is in trial has an investigator brochure. So the expectedness of the drug, which might be serious or not, it is already listed in the IB or the SNPC. So that becomes the expectedness of the drug. And unexpectedness is nothing but the ADR, whether serious or not, it is not listed in the IB or SNPC. Then coming to the labeled and unlabeled. So anything which is been mentioned in the label becomes a label, while anything which is not been mentioned in the label, it is unlabeled. So the ADRs which are mentioned in label or not in label becomes labeled and unlabeled. Then coming to the listedness and unlistedness. So any reaction which is not included in the company core data safety information within the company core data sheet for the marketed product, like it's listed or unlisted. The drug might be listed or not listed. The ADR might be listed or not listed in the company core data sheet. So one product can have one SNPC, but there are if there are like a company core data sheet is a subset of many SNPCs. So company core data sheet sheet, it's a huge document which has a aggregation of this summary of product characteristics. So next is coming to the serious adverse drug reaction. So there are definitions to what is classified as serious and non-serious. So FDA and EMA reports adverse drug reaction as serious when it falls under following criteria. It causes death, or if it is life-threatening, that is real risk of dying. If it is inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization, it causes disability that is significant, persistent, or permanent, or it causes congenital anomaly, or it requires an intervention to prevent permanent, impaired, or damaged. So these are the various criteria wherein a company calls there are some regulations being laid down where these definitions are being uh, done. So these are the various definitions. So serious is one which causes death, life-threatening, ADRs which causes death, life-threatening, inpatient hospitalization, congenital anomaly. So these all fall under serious adverse drug reaction. And something like medically significant SUSAR, these are of really special interest because these are serious and serious unexpected suspected adverse drug reactions. So adverse drug reaction which were really not expected from that drug, these are really medically significant, and it plays a major role in the health authority risk assessments. So these are like serious. These are the one which are not included in the product core safety data sheet, and it has suspected link to the drug. Then this is the classification of adverse drug reaction. So there are different ways of classification. So one of the ways is depending on the onset of the event. So you have either acute where you have less than 60 minutes, then subacute where the adverse event is has occurred in like 1 to 24 hours, and the latent is greater than 2 days. Then type of reaction. So there are different type of reaction, that is augmented, bizarre, types is chemical, delayed, genotoxicity, hypersensitivity. So these are the various classification, different way of classification. Then there is classification based on severity, that is minor, moderate, severe, and lethal. So these are the major like classification of ADRs. Then others are like side effects, secondary effects, toxic effects, intolerance, drug withdrawal reactions, teratogenicity, carcinogenicity. This falls under the others category. So classification based on the adverse drug reaction. So so if you see type A is augmented. So augmented is nothing but this is the ADR that adverse drug reaction has occurred, which is because of the dose dependent adverse drug. So when there is dose reduction, the ADR decreases. When there is increase in the dose of a particular drug, the ADR increases. So this is related to the dose dependency. So for example, let's say hypoglycemia. So when insulin is given, there is hypoglycemia which is occurring. Then when anticoagulants are given, you have bleeding. So this increase in the dose causes increase in the adverse drug reaction. So next is bizarre. So bizarre is nothing but it is unpredictable and dose independent. So it can occur due to like any factor. So and these are rare and fatal. So like anaphylaxis to penicillin, then hypersensitivity that is caused because of anticonvulsant drug. Then next is type C, that is chemical, wherein prolonged treatment of a particular drug causes adverse drug reaction. So for example, paracetamol in prolonged treatment of it causes hepatotoxicity. Then you have type D as delayed. So delayed is nothing but the adverse drug reaction occur after some years of treatment. So for example, when you give antipsychotic drugs, so after prolonged treatment with this antipsychotic drug, it causes tardive dyskinesia. Then next is type E, that is end of use. So these are usually when a particular treatment is taken and suddenly there is a withdrawal or the end of the treatment, which causes the adverse drug reaction. So when phenytoin is withdrawn, it causes seizures. So next is the causality assessment of the adverse drug reaction. So causality assessment is nothing but the uh, like the probability of drug Pareto algorithm is actually used. It's used for determination of the ADR probability. So you have different parameters mentioned, like from 1 to 10. So are there any previous conclusive reports on this reaction? So there is a scoring that is done, that is yes, no, or don't know. So then you have a cumulative score out of this. And if the cumulative score, if it is greater than 9, then there is a very high probability that the adverse drug reaction has occurred because of the drug. And if it is between 5 to 8, it is probable. If it is between 1 to 4, it is possible. And if it is less than equal to 0, then it is a doubtful that there is very less likely chance that adverse drug reaction is because of the drug taken. Then you have the severity assessment of adverse drug reaction. So there are many different scales which are used. So one of this is Hartwig severity assessment scale. So where you have a different level, you have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 until level 7, and you have different parameters, that is whether an ADR has occurred but there is no change in the treatment with the suspected drug. Then level 2 has adverse drug required the treatment with the suspected drug which was held and discontinued. Then so on, you have different levels. And the level 7 being the adverse drug reaction either directly or indirectly which causes the lead death of the patient. So if the level 1 is level 1 and level 2 becomes the mild, then moderate becomes the level 3 and level 4, and the severe one, the severity becomes high when the score or the level is very high, that is average score is very like between 5, 6 and 7. Then adverse drug reaction monitoring. So there is an international center, that is Uppsala Monitoring Center, Sweden, which is an WHO collaborating center for international drug monitoring. So it keeps a track of each and every ADR that is occurred because of the drug. So now what is the mechanism of like how this is kept a track of? So there are different centers at a country level which actually provides inputs to the regulatory health authority at the country level, and this regulatory health authority, this national centers in turn provides their input to the Uppsala Monitoring Center, and there is a reconciliation of the adverse drug reaction which takes place, and there is an up-to-date information on the particular drug, what are the different ADRs and all. So this is a flowchart which will actually give you like regional center A, you have regional center B. They all are providing the information to the national center, to the regulatory health authorities. The adverse drug reaction coming from industry are also again reported to the health authorities, and ultimately the WHO database, that is Vigibase, it is called as, been reported to the WHO, that is Uppsala Monitoring Center. So now adverse drug reaction at various stages of drug discovery. So if you see the chart, you have this is a normal drug discovery process with different right from the early drug discovery to the post monitoring marketing of the drug. So you have early drug discovery wherein you have target identification, hit discovery, high throughput screening, and all those stuff. Then you have preclinical studies being done where you have in vitro, in vivo studies, ADME studies, and POC, drug delivery, and all those. Then you have clinical development, that is you have right from phase 0, that is early phase 1, to phase 4. So you have the clinical development of the wherein you study the safety and efficacy. Then you have the review process from FDA after the approval of the drug, and the post marketing. So the ADRs can come from different sources. So you can have drugs, the ADRs that can come from in vitro and in vivo studies, that is animal studies. You can have adverse drug reaction that can come from phase 1, that is the true monitoring of safety. then you have phase 2, phase 3, and the post marketing. So these are the various sources from which you can get the adverse drug reactions. So the further more details, like in case of pre-marketing, during the development, you can have like during the preclinical, that is animal and in vitro studies, you can have the adverse drug reaction coming. Then in the from the clinical development, that is from phase 1 to phase 3, you can have the adverse drug reactions being reported. Then in case of post marketing, you have spontaneous reporting. Then you can have spontaneous reporting is nothing but anybody like healthcare professional or non healthcare professional can report. Then you have adverse drug reaction coming from health regulatory authorities. So there are many channels by which directly the adverse drug reactions come to health regulatory authorities, and the regulatory authorities then transfer those cases to the company, and there are assessments made and all those stuff. Then you have contractual partners. So contractual partners is nothing but when you have a product and for which you have a tie-up, the license partner for that particular product, and that particular product is being marketed by the partner, and he is responsible for the collection of the safety related profile. Then you have adverse drug reaction that come from published and the medical literature. So you might have the literature as a source of adverse drug reaction. In case of literature also, there are different screening tools like ELISA and all those various platforms which screens the adverse drug reaction from the literature. So then you have clinical trials. So in case of clinical trials, you have post-marketing and phase 4 studies. And also there are data which has been collected from other purpose like patient-oriented program, routine statistics, patient registries, and all. So these all are the sources of different adverse drug reaction. So next is the regulatory reporting, which is the most important part. So why the reporting is important? So first thing, it is ethical requirement. It's a regulatory requirement. Then and it is also a legal requirement. So a company who markets its own product needs to keep a track of the safety of the drug. Then who reports? It is the complete responsibility of the company first, because it is the one who is marketing the drug. Then you have the company and the investigator who are actually conducting the trials, the healthcare professionals, that is doctors, dentists, pharmacists, nurse assistants, etc. Then you have non-healthcare professionals who are the consumers. Consumers can be any friend or neighbor, anybody can report the adverse drug reaction. So but there are some assessments made when the adverse drug reaction come from the non-HCPs. So and when to report it? So especially in case of the unexpected events, the event should go to the health authorities within 7 to 15 days. And once a drug has been launched in the market, there is a periodicity wherein a company has to abide and send some reports of safety. So there are some minimum data requirements for a reportable ADR. So reportable ADR has to have some minimum four criteria. So it needs to have an identifiable patient. There needs to be an adverse event or adverse drug reaction, and there needs to be a suspected medicinal. There needs to be a medicinal product because of which the adverse drug reaction has occurred, and there has to be a reporter, that might be a healthcare professional or a non-healthcare professional. So these are the minimum 4 criteria that are required for a complete case. If any of these are missing, it becomes an incomplete case. So this is one of the form which has been used to keep a track of all the details of the adverse drug reaction. So there are marketing authorization responsibilities in the pharmacovigilance. So the marketing authorization holder is one who markets the drug. So he needs to keep a track of timely collection of all the data recording all of the safety profile of the drug. Then appropriate assessments needs to be done about the data completeness, its seriousness, relatedness, expectedness, its medical significance, and within the timelines. And the expedited and periodic reporting is again, if it is medically significant adverse drug reaction, it needs to be submitted to the health authority within the timelines. Then there are signal detection and proactive risk management. So these are of special interest. Any new findings that has come because of taking that drug becomes the signal. So this is the complete crux of the ADR workflow. So the data in has collection of the adverse drug reaction from different sources, that is literature reports, you have spontaneous reports, you have adverse drug reaction coming from clinical trials, post marketing, then some follow-up reports. You might have from the regulatory reports from the various contract partners. So data is the data is processed, there are some data is been entered, then you have the data review, that is medical assessment is done, wherein there is a thorough assessment whether the adverse drug reaction is because of the drug or it is not because of the drug, whether it is serious, whether it is not serious, and there are some signal detection that is being carried out during this process. And after that there is an output, that is there is submission of this adverse drug reaction to the health authorities. There is amendment of the prescribing information, that is amendment of the labels, the company data core sheet. Then there is review in the marketing status if the frequency of the adverse drug reaction is very fatal and it's very life threatening, there might be withdrawal of the particular drug. Then there are various worldwide regulatory reports which are expedited. Then we need to also send the adverse drug reaction to the licensed partners, and there are some health authority queries that are answered to the during this process. So ultimately it is right from collection to collation to analysis, the communication of the ADRs to the health authorities is very important, and it plays a crucial role in the benefit risk assessment of the drug. So this is just an example wherein let's say if there is an adverse drug reaction event that has occurred because of a particular product and it has been reported in US. So when the adverse event is reported in the database, after the adverse drug is been reported, there is a cascading event that takes place. There is submission to the submission of the adverse drug reaction to the health authorities. Then there are label changes. Then there are periodic safety update reports. So there are PSURs wherein you need to update the adverse drug reaction in those. Then you have submission to the health authorities. Then also wherever the drug is being marketed in various across the globe, to those health authorities you need to submit the reports to all the health authorities wherever the drug is involved, also to the investigators where the clinical trial is been associated and ongoing clinical trial. So these are the different safety report documents. So you have individual case safety reports, that is nowadays everything is electronic. The paper based ADR is no more used nowadays. Then you have MedWatch and the CIOMS forms. You have patient safety narratives. So these are the various modes and the reports wherein you have an electronic submission of the adverse drug reaction to the health authorities. So different countries have different regulations and guidelines and different timelines of submission of these ICSRs. Then you have periodic or the aggregate reports. So once, so in case of pre-marketing is nothing but you have when a drug is in clinical trial. So any adverse drug reaction occurring during the clinical trial, has to be reported. So there are annual safety reports. That is, in case of EU, it is called as developmental safety update report. In case of US, it is called as IND annual safety reports. So these are the pre-marketing reports and annual reports which needs to be submitted to the health authorities. Then you have periodic safety update reports. So these are the most important ones. So when a drug is launched in the market, as soon as the drug is authorized in the market, a company has to abide by sending this periodic safety update reports. So after the drug is authorized, they need to send the report 6 monthly. Once the drug is marketed, every 6 months for next 2 years, the company has to send the periodic safety update reports. So now this periodic safety update reports, in a nutshell, these are nothing but it is the benefit risk profile of the drug, so which needs to be sent. So after a drug is marketed, for every 6 months for the next 2 years, the company has to send. Then it has to send annually for the next 2 years. Then every 3 years, they need to send the periodic safety update report. So periodic safety update report has been called in Europe, and in case of US, it is called as periodic adverse experience reports. So in case of US, it is you need to send the report quarterly for first 3 years, and then annually you need to send this PADER. So these are the drug safety requirements. So it is very important to understand the global requirements and regulation, and the different SOPs which are been associated to adverse drug reaction collection, assessment, reporting, and risk management. And you need to have a validated database. Like there are different tools to collect the adverse drug reaction, like RSG, Argus, Oracle, AERS, etc. Then you need to have a data backup of all the tools. Then what are the resource and their profiles? So usually the drug safety associates have the medical, that is allopathic, integrated BMS and BHMS profile, and the life science graduates. The drug safety physicians are the medical graduates with an experience in the safety assessment. Then you have medical and safety writers, the drug safety experts who have experience with as a drug safety physician. So you can find the drug side effects on the DailyMed, which is an FDA regulated and governed website. So you can enter the drug and you can find the adverse drug reactions. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Right. Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. You have given a complete overview of the adverse drug reaction and its reporting and in what way it helps. So now I call upon Madam Sadhana Madam to make her presentation, and the most important resources is antibiotics or antimicrobials. Madam, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. And I must appreciate and congratulate you for being in the forefront, as Mr. Reddy said. I really, really thank you guys for keeping us safe all through these maybe 5-6 months that we are going through this pandemic. So, okay, let me start with my presentation, and that is about antimicrobials. The mechanisms of action of antimicrobials and what exactly you need to know about the antimicrobials as such. Everything that you need to know, meaning whether it is resistance, how it works, how is it useful, is it life-saving, whatever. So if you think of antimicrobials, you can, categorize them as into different categories like antibiotics, particularly antibacterials, which take care of the bacterial infections like pneumonia, or antivirals, which take care of the viral infections, or antiparasitic, like those used in malaria, or antifungals, which are used in some fungal infections, skin infections, hair infections, something like that. Now, antibiotics essentially means that these are the chemicals that are obtained from microorganisms themselves. So something like penicillin was obtained from fungi, polymyxin, bacitracin was obtained from bacteria, and tetracycline, streptomycin-like antibiotics, griseofulvin, macrolides, erythromycin kind antibiotics. These are all obtained from a different kind of bacteria, meaning generally antibiotics are those which are obtained from microorganisms themselves. Now, this is a very busy slide, but just to let you know that antibiotics can also be classified as per their chemical structures. So maybe you may have come across these beta-lactam antibiotics, the ones which have a beta-lactam ring in their structure, or you may have heard about sulfa, which has got a sulfanilamide and an amino group. So this is a chemistry. On basis of chemistry, you can classify the antibiotics as well. And mechanisms, how do these antibiotics work? So basically, antibiotics or antimicrobials are used to prevent the growth or to kill the microorganisms which are actually infecting the human beings. So, it is very essential to understand that these organisms are, they also cellular organisms, and not virus, but all the others. And they may have the nuclear material in terms of DNA and RNA. They may have some enzymes which are essential for making proteins of life, or they may have the ribosomal particles which are essential for making proteins transcribed and translated from DNA. And they may have a cell membrane to enclose all this, and a cell wall, so that they also have a shape most of the times. Some exceptions are of course there. Now, what are the mechanisms of action? So mechanisms of antibiotics are those, by one way or the other, which are inhibiting either the growth of the microorganism or which are killing the microorganism. So simple thing is like inhibition of cell wall synthesis or function. So many of them, penicillin, cephalosporins. So these are all ones which attack or which inhibit the cell wall synthesis. There are certain antibiotics which inhibit the protein synthesis, particularly the ribosomal units 50S and 30S, which inhibit the ribosomal units, and they inhibit the proteins of life synthesis. And that's how the organism is killed, the growth is suppressed. Or there are antibiotics which can inhibit the DNA synthesis or RNA synthesis. So inhibition of nucleic acid synthesis or its function could also be one of the mechanisms. Particularly, we know about quinolones or ciprofloxacin because you would know it. You must have used it daily, moxifloxacin. So they inhibit DNA gyrases, or there is sulfamethoxazole, which inhibits the folate, dihydroterate synthesis, or trimethoprim, that is dihydrofolate reductase. So any one of these, which we will consider later, or maybe some antibiotics would just create free radicals, reactive radicals that would just kill the microbial cell for that matter. So these are different mechanisms by which the antibiotics act. I thought it is very important to inform you or explain you about the mechanism of growth of microorganisms so that it becomes easy for you how we could prevent that further. So this is you can say clinical classification, which is based on organisms, antibiotics which are active against, primarily active against certain organisms. So like when you talk of antibacterials, they are active against bacteria, and fungals which tackle the fungal infections of skin and hair, viral which tackle the viral infection like herpes, chickenpox, etc. Antiprotozoals are those which tackle amoebiasis or malaria. Anthelmintics are those which tackle helminthiasis, or you can have n number of classes, anti-TB, anti-leprosy, anything. So it is clinical classification. Now, as we discussed before, the major targets are, first of all, cell wall, nucleic acid synthesis, and protein synthesis. So cell wall and cell membrane will take it in one. Nucleic acid, folate synthesis, RNA polymerase is one, and protein synthesis is one. This is how we will discuss. So penicillins or beta-lactam containing antibiotics would inhibit cell wall synthesis. There are certain antibiotics which would create pores in the cell membrane. So amphotericin, polymyxin, that would create pores in the cell membrane and the cell would not live. Something like sulfonamide doesn't is capable of inhibiting production of dihydrofolate, and trimethoprim further prevents the conversion of dihydro to tetrahydrofolate, which further leads to DNA and RNA bases. So if these folate synthesis are inhibited, the proteins of life, the DNA, RNA bases and DNA replication wouldn't happen. So this is how the sulfas work. Then we discussed about tetracyclines and drugs like streptomycin, which work on 30S, meaning both these are ribosomal subunits. So both these are translators into protein, meaning they take it from DNA and they make protein. So these are protein making units, and these are inhibited by certain antibiotics like tetracycline, streptomycin, or macrolides like erythromycin, chloramphenicol. So this is how protein synthesis is inhibited. Rifampicin inhibits RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase is one which picks up the signal from the DNA to produce proteins of life. So, uh, what do you say? An enzyme which is intermediary, that is only inhibited. So proteins of life are not produced. And there is something like quinolones, particularly Cipro, Moxi, Gatifloxacin. All these antibiotics would inhibit DNA gyrase. This is a typical enzyme in the replication of DNA. So DNA is not replicated, the cells don't grow, the cells are killed. So now, type of actions are typically two types. They are classified into bacteriostatic and bactericidal. So static meaning the ones which prevent the growth of microorganisms, and cidal meaning the ones which kill the microorganism. Now also understand one thing, that many a times primarily static drugs do become cidal at higher concentration. So particularly sulfas. The concentration, see, sulfas get excreted by the kidneys into the urine, and high concentration in the urine makes them bactericidal. So this is, uh, even if it is static, it can become cidal at higher concentration, and that's the reason UTIs you can use sulfur very uh, uh, comfortably. Or sometimes the cidal drugs like cotrimoxazole or streptomycin, they can become static under certain circumstances. So just to tell you, although primarily they are bacteriostatic or bactericidal, they could be, cidal or static depending on how they work. Again, the next thing is about spectrum of activity. Either they could be broad spectrum, meaning active against huge range of microorganisms, maybe gram positive, gram negative, uh, parasitic, helminths, broad spectrum. And narrow spectrum, particularly, I would list this example penicillin G, which is essentially against gram positive. So that's how, narrow spectrum meaning only against a particular spectrum, and broad spectrum meaning against many kinds of bacteria as such. See, as a hospital pharmacist, you are also, it is very important to understand what is this antibiotic resistance and why should we know about it. And you must have heard about it that worldwide people are talking about this antibiotic resistance simply because it is very difficult to treat infections because the microorganisms have become antibiotic resistant. The best example is TB, and India is really suffering from multiple drug resistant TB. We know that. And so, why this happens? Now, this can happen, there are few reasons for that. So, there are a lot of microorganisms, and few of them are resistant to that particular antibiotic. Maybe they are mutated, and that's the reason they are resistant. Now, sometimes antibiotics they kill bacteria that cause illness, but they also kill the symbiotic bacteria which are there in our gut. And these symbiotic bacteria which are there in our gut, they provide us innate immunity. So that is lost. So the bacteria which is affecting us becomes resistant because our immune is not working properly. So this is also one of the reasons. The third reason could be the antibiotic resistant bacteria, it just grows and takes over, the mutation that only grows and that stops resisting, the antibiotic for that matter. And some bacteria also mutate, and they also pass on their resistance to other bacteria, causing more problems. So particularly antibiotic resistant bacteria, this is an example of mutation. They just mutate their enzymes on which the antibiotic was working, or they just produce some other protein like efflux protein that just throws the antibiotic out of the cell. So this mutations could produce resistance to antibiotic, or they could pass on these mutations to the other microorganisms, and the whole thing becomes resistant. And that's the reason it is very important to understand what is the mechanism of action and why resistance. So now why antibiotic resistance? So over prescription of antibiotics, if you keep on overdosing yourself with antibiotics for small things which could even be cured by generally good lifestyle, if that doesn't, and good standards of hygiene, and if you just go on pushing in or popping in antibiotic pills, that could lead to mutations in the bacteria or microbes, and you could really have a bad kind of antibiotic resistance. Second thing is patients not finishing their treatment. This is very common. People have serious diarrhea and they take norfloxacin. I'm taking it into consideration that you know this. And then when you take it within one day, you feel good. So, my God, why should I overdose it? Let me stop. Please, no. You have to complete the dose because then the bacteria is smarter than you and it mutates, and the antibiotic next time will not work for you. So, you have to finish the whole course. That is very important. Other thing is overuse of antibiotics in livestock and fish farming for non-infected and uh, milk, dairy, meat products for that matter. So, but isn't it that we are only getting exposed to all the antibiotics that have been fed to these hens, cows, or fish, anything? And so the bacteria would get naturally, what you say, mutated and cause resistance. Poor infection control in hospitals and clinic and lack of hygiene, both these are similar, and poor sanitation would also lead to antibiotic resistance. So generally it is very important to educate people, and I'm sure it is you would be doing that. I as a pharmacist keep doing that. And lastly but not least, lack of new antibiotics being developed. This is really serious. We really don't have good antibiotics over a long period of time now. So now what I'll do is, I'll just take you through a few classes of antibiotics and the way they work and the way their mechanisms of resistance is. Now I'll also explain you something about the generations of antibiotics. So let us first do the penicillins and cephalosporins. So you see the structure. This is the beta-lactam ring. So this is 6-aminopenicilloic acid. For cephalosporins, this structure is different, but this ring is the same. So these antibiotics are called as beta-lactam antibiotics because of this particular structure here. So this structure interferes with bacterial cell wall synthesis by inhibiting bacterial enzyme, which is necessary for synthesis of the bacterial cell wall. Now, how do they do that? They bind to a protein binding site. This is called as penicillin binding protein, which is there on the cell membrane. So they bind on that and they get activated and they inhibit this enzyme transpeptidase. Now, this transpeptidase is an enzyme which is essential to form a solid wall by linking the peptides. And so once this enzyme is inhibited, the cell wall is not properly formed. And once the cell wall is not properly formed, the cell gets purged with the water leaks into the cell gets purged and bursted. So you can say because the cell is bursting, it is a bactericidal action. It's killing the cell. And it generally on growing or multiplying cell because cell wall is forming like that. So that means what is important? Beta-lactam is important. PBP is important to get inside. And beta-lactam is important to inhibit this transpeptidase wall. So how is the resistance? Do resistance comes to penicillin? So yes. So there are beta-lactamase. So meaning the ones which cleaves the beta-lactam ring. So once which opens the beta-lactam ring, it's no longer active in inhibiting the transpeptidase. So this beta-lactamase is also called as penicillinase because penicillin was the first one found. And so all the cephalosporins are later. Generally, it is termed as penicillinase, but actually it is a beta-lactamase. Or otherwise, there would be alteration in the target enzymes like the PBP mutation. The penicillin binding protein site only would mutate. So the penicillins won't go and attach, and so naturally they can't get into the cell. They can't get activated. They won't be able to work. Or this is something very crucial to the gram-negative ones because there could be alteration of the porin channel. See, first it binds to the PBP and then it enters. So, if there is a problem with the porin channel, the drug cannot enter inside the cell. And particularly gram-negative bacteria, they have a membrane which lacks porins. Now, cephalosporin mechanism of action is exactly like penicillin, exactly like it's a beta-lactam thing. Resistance is also similar. And I just wanted to explain you the generations. So in 1960s, they were active against only gram-positive, but very weak against negative. So when they got in second generation cefuroxime, it is active against gram-positive and against even gram-negative, meaning positive though it is, but active against even gram-negative. So little spectrum increased. Now in 1980s, they still became larger spectrum. They produced ones which are resistant to beta-lactamase from gram-negative. So it's very important because staphylococcus infection, you know that nosocomial infections of MRSA, you could treat that with these. And furthermore, going ahead, resistant to many beta-lactamase. So, generations of antibiotic, meaning extending the spectrum of the antibiotics for that matter. Now, second action that we could think of is causing cell membrane leakage. So inside the cell wall, there's a cell membrane, and that cell membrane is like our cell membrane, which allows entry and exit of certain electrolytes for that matter. So good example is amphotericin, which is a antifungal agent which binds with the ergosterol. Like we have cholesterol in our membrane, the fungal cell will have ergosterol in their membrane, and they just punch pores in the ergosterol. So when they punch pore, the leakage of ions like sodium, potassium, hydrogen chloride, that takes place and the fungal cell dies then. Or similar examples are polymyxin and bacitracin. So these are colistin. These are used for various indications as stated here. So this is simply the mechanism, like you have an ergosterol and then amphotericin or Pauline would just punch pore in, and the uh, electrolytes would just get out and the cell would die. So resistance to these kind of antibiotics is rare. It is intrinsic or acquired, generally not there, but clinical resistance cases could be there. So clinical resistance could be because of the immune status of the host. The host immune status, if it is not good, the antibiotic wouldn't work. And about the PK, adequate concentration of the drug, if it doesn't reach the site, it could have resistance. And even fungal infections which are different, which are resistant, meaning the bacteria has the microorganism has acquired resistance, and that's very difficult, meaning you can say rare, it is clinical. Now, inhibition of protein synthesis. We discussed about the ribosomal particles producing proteins of life. So that's tetracycline. Various tetracyclines are there in the market, and you see the use. It's a broad spectrum antibiotic used for from venereal diseases to pneumonia to cholera to plague to rickettsial, and it inhibits the tetracycline. See, bacterial ribosome is 70s particle. We saw it is 50s and 30s. So 30s binds to messenger RNA and initiates protein synthesis. So tetracyclines reversibly bind to 30s and they prevent the attachment of amino acyl tRNA, transfer RNA into ribosomal, and it terminates the translation process. So proteins of life are not formed and bacterial growth is inhibited. So it is static and only effective against multiplying microorganisms. So, but tetracycline also may pose resistance. Why? Because bacteria could just insert certain proteins which are called as efflux protein into their cell membranes. So tetracycline would just pushed off. It wouldn't just enter the bacterial cell. Or there would be, different proteins which would be produced, like there would be mutations in the RNA or in the ribosomal proteins, and tetracycline wouldn't work. It wouldn't be able to bind and inhibit and prevent the 30th subunit. Or tetracycline itself could be metabolized by bacterial oxygenases and not active, meaning resistance could happen. Similar in the category is aminoglycoside antibiotics, particularly streptomycin and gentamicin. I'm giving you two examples. And topical aminoglycoside like neomycin is always there, pramycetin is there. Same mechanism of action, exactly same mechanism of action like that of tetracycline, that they inhibit the 30th subunit of rRNA and cause misleading of tRNA, ribosomal, translational, and produce wrong peptides. Don't produce peptides for life and cause death of the bacteria. They all exhibit ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity. So this is a very important aspect of this, simply because they get excreted by kidneys majorly. And you must have heard about streptomycin causing ototoxicity, particularly in case of TB infection, where you need to give these antibiotics for a longer time. And similar mechanism of resistance like bacterial enzymatic modification and inactivation or efflux protein production. Because of that, decreased permeability and modification of the 30S ribosomal unit that interferes in binding. So same mechanism of resistance as that of tetracycline. Now this is something very different, which is inhibiting the DNA formation in a microorganism. So a good example is fluoroquinolones, particularly ciprofloxacin. The first one was nalodixic, which was introduced in 1960s, but it was only for gram negative, meaning the spectrum was narrow and limited to urinary and gastrointestinal tract infections. But in 1980s, fluoroquinolones were discovered with very high potency and expanded spectrum, and which slow the development of resistance and also shows better tissue penetration and good tolerability. So how does it work? So it binds to DNA complex. So there are two enzymes, DNA gyrase, that is topoisomerase 2 and topoisomerase 4. So two enzymes are there which are responsible for replication of DNA. So both these enzymes, DNA gyrase, they kind of uncoil the DNA so that new DNA strand is formed. And once that strand is formed, again uncoiling of that into chromosomes by topoisomerase 4 and putting it everywhere, meaning putting it in the cell. So this is like DNA replication. This is inhibited by ciprofloxacin, and therefore it has got a lethal effect on the cell. The first generation is norfloxacin, ofloxacin, ciprofloxacin. The second generation, the spectrum is increased. Now, they work against COPD, community acquired pneumonia, uh, chronic obstructive lung disorders. So, it is from genitourinary to upper respiratory, lower respiratory, skin and soft tissue. So, when the spectrum increases, naturally the generation becomes higher generation. Better infections that you can treat with these antibiotics for that matter. So how does resistance occur to these antibiotics? So the resistance develops by again mutations in the bacteria which are encoding for DNA gyrase or topoisomerase 4, meaning topoisomerase 2 or topoisomerase 4. Or they could even put, insert efflux proteins into the cell wall so that the antibiotic would just get effluxed out. The bacterial cell would just not get the antibiotic. Forget about inhibiting the enzyme. So this is, one of the dangerous things, that the antibiotic just gets effluxed. And second thing is mutations in binding sites, gyrase and topoisomerase. So it can't bind and resist, and that's why there is a resistance to these antibiotics. Now, cotrimoxazole, which is sulfa and trimethoprim. So para-aminobenzoic acid is converted to dihydrofluoric acid by DHPS, dihydropteroate synthase, and DHF, dihydrofluoric acid, is converted by DHFR, folate reductase, to tetrahydrofluoric acid. And tetrahydrofluoric acid further produces purines and pyrimidines bases, meaning purines as in AGCTU, which are further producing DNA and RNA. So, meaning DNA and proteins of life. So, if you inhibit production of DHF or THF, DNA won't be produced. And this is the mechanism of action of sulfa. Sulfa simply works at this, and trimethoprim works at DHF to THF. And so trimethoprim is, both of them together, they are bactericidal in nature. And they have a good spectrum of action like typhoid, Klebsiella, and many resistant strains of staph, Shigella, E. coli, gonococci, meningococci. So Now, concise summary. Now, whatever that we have studied, I'm simply summarizing it here for you. And that we studied that in a bacteria, there are certain targets which produce the mechanism of action, namely the cell wall synthesis or DNA synthesis, or folate, which leads to DNA synthesis, or cell membrane that keeps the bacterial cell intact, or protein synthesis that makes proteins of life for the bacteria for that matter. So these are the different targets, and the resistant mechanisms generally are by efflux proteins or by immunity and bypass changes in the target changes in the drug for that matter, or target modifications, ribosomal units or DNA gyrase or topoisomerase enzyme. That's one. Or simply inactivating enzymes for beta lactams or aminoglycosides, etc. So this is how the resistance to antibiotics takes place, and we can control also the growth of antimicrobes by using antibiotics. So this is I always feel that it is the kind of tug of war between human beings and the microorganisms. We are smart, they are smarter than us. So whoever wins, wins it. So we have to keep on struggling, discovering newer and newer antibiotics and trying to control the microbial infections, because that can really cost life to a person. So now, these are some posters which I want to exhibit, and I want you all to read about it. That there are there is an awareness week later on, but then I'm so sorry, want to show you that they are life saving. So should be used for life saving only. Only to treat bacterial infections. Common cough and cold and sore throat, don't take it. Some ear infections and many sinusitis also can get better without any antibiotics. Don't overprescribe, don't self-prescribe. If you get green colored mucus, no worries. It is just bacterial end products that are showing up in the mucus. No worries. You could just, have good hygiene, good safety, drink a lot of water, and have a good lifestyle. You could take care of that. And always remember that there are risks when you take any medication. It's a chemical. You're exposing your body to that chemical. Now, understand that resistance is a threat to your health. Otherwise, you could have corrected, controlled the microorganism growth, which is not possible now. So, I like this poster because, the bacteria is saying, I am winning, because the human beings are stupid. They are just trying too many antibiotics on me, and the minute it gets exposed, it mutates. So it is looking at us as a poor species for that matter. So let us not make this happen. We should prevent antibiotic resistance, and it is very important for general public to talk to the pharmacist. So it is your responsibility to use the antibiotics responsibly. And this slide is very busy. This can be shared with you, but then always remember that you take the antibiotic as advised. Tell your doctor about any side effect that you get, and keep them always in a safe place, away from children. Always watch out for any side effects and take care while buying them. See the expiry for that matter. Of course, this is for general and for you all to be responsible. Do not self medicate. Do not believe that they are cures for any illness. Not really. They don't stop your, please don't stop your treatment midway. We saw resistance could happen. Do not skip the doses and do not use expired medicines. So that finishes my talk, and I'm open to any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
We do have a lot of questions in the chat box. I'm not sure that
Oh no,
4:30 is not sufficient time for that. But Yeah,
Oh,
Dr.
God.
Mohanta has some certain questions with him, which he would like to ask.
Thank you, madam. So nice presentation, giving the complete aware view of preserving antibiotics. Because if we understand antibiotics properly, we'll be able to preserve them for future, because antibiotics are most important resources that we. Madam, there are few questions for you, and one question for Dr. Pankaj. So I begin with Dr. Pankaj. One participant has asked, in a hospital, it is whose responsibility to repost adverse drug reaction? Dr. Pankaj?
We'll check with him, sir, if he's online.
Okay.
I think we can ask.
So, madam, here is the first question.
Yeah, I'm taking it. Yeah.
Are antibiotics like erythromycin
Huh.
useful in corona patients?
Okay.
I mean, COVID-19 patients.
So, nobody knows about it, but there was a trial in France in the month of March where they have tried hydroxychloroquine with azithro, and they have seen that the viral load got controlled. So, but see, today, as of today, there is no foolproof evidence that yes, it works or no, it doesn't work.
And here,
but the trial is there which shows that HCQ with azithro has worked.
yes, madam. Along with that question, there is one more question.
Yes.
How hydroxychloroquine helps in COVID-19 patient?
Okay. So I think I had read about it. But I'll have to, can I give the answer just after reading it? Meaning not offhand, but I'll
Probably
leave
that is not a problem. We can definitely
Can I
do
just,
that. We can do that. And I have
But
read
I have read
little.
about
May I
it.
just supplement, madam?
Yeah, sure.
I have
sure.
read a little about this hydroxychloroquine, because there was a lot of interest generated.
Exactly.
On
In America
it.
also, they said it is the prophylactic.
And
that's how it
actually more interest has come because American president said he is taking this, and he asked for this to India.
No, but Dr. Monta, I know many doctors myself who are taking hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic since March, and they are frontline workers, and no infections even in the house,
And
even for babies.
yes, madam. The mechanism what is known till date is they reduce the viral load. They reduce the viral load, but exact mechanism how it happens, that is not yet known. This is, but there was the issue with this hydroxychloroquine.
Okay.
And our azithromycin together. Some of the doctors even suffered severe cardiovascular event leading to death. That also has happened.
Yes, there was one Assamese doctor who
Yes, madam.
suffered.
Absolutely
I
right.
remember that. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Madam, then one more question. Why some antibiotics are not recommended with milk, like tetracycline?
Yes. So what happens? You've seen the tetracycline structure. I think I showed you. And milk has got calcium, and tetracycline chelates that. Because of that huge ring, it chelates that. And so absorption of tetracycline gets hampered. And so once tetracycline is not hampered, it's like not using it. It's like that. And that's why, you be sure as hospital pharmacists that nobody prescribes them with milk, with breakfast. Trust me, I've even seen patients getting such prescriptions also. Take it with breakfast. So milk के साथ ले लूँ, हाँ ले लो. So no, you shouldn't be taking tetracycline with milk because it's not useful then. It won't be useful. It won't be absorbed only.
And just a little addition to it, my pharmacy friend, many times we are using, yes, we don't take milk, but we take ice cream, we take the tea, coffee with milk. This is so while talking to the patient, we need to be little more elaborate. And second, sometimes some other medicines like the gastric antacids, which also
Yes.
contains the
Alkalinity that they
this
create.
like your magnesium hydroxide,
Yes, yes.
aluminum hydroxide,
Divalent ions which could, be chelated. You are
even
right.
the iron tonic.
Hmm.
Iron tonic. We are all fancy with all these things, but it is not just only the milk. Along with many others are similar issues.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, my friends, please, while talking to the patient, be little more assertive and elaborative, which will definitely help them.
Right, sir.
One more question, madam.
Yes.
When we say the antibiotic resistance is one of the biggest threat
Yes.
to the humankind, and probably at this moment, if we see after this corona, it becomes the antibiotic resistance.
Yes.
Madam, the one of our participant is asking, what government strategies are there to combat antibiotic resistance?
I can simply tell you this good example of this DOTS program that government has started for TB medications. See what happens, TB therapeutics is quite long. I mean, first, so it is for 6 months, it is major, and then it goes slowly, like for another 2 years. And because if you don't take the treatment properly, as I told you, if the concentration of the antibiotic is not enough, then the bacteria mutates, and more so with the TB bacteria. And that's the reason the government has made it very, like people, there are health workers which go to every house, and they ensure that these are the drugs, have it in front of me, show me that you have had it. So they are ensuring, and they are finding that there are like you are capable of controlling the resistance for that matter. So this is happening for TB. That is the government initiative, and then they are advertising also with bigger personalities like Amitabh Bachchan, and so that is going on. Government is taking initiative.
Madam, right now one more question has come.
Fine.
Because people really want to know about antibiotics.
And I would love to.
Yes, ma'am. So is it better to take antibiotics with food or without food before breakfast?
So this is also a very important question. So sometimes some drugs like amoxicillin, they have to be taken on empty stomach. There are guidelines. So please refer to that. It's not always taken. Mostly what we do now, we generally take food, and maybe half an hour or 1 hour after the food, we take the antibiotic or take any drug for that matter, so that there is no irritation and inflammation. But for certain antibiotics, you have to take it empty stomach, and that is known. So be sure, like drugs like amoxicillin, cephalexin, you have to take it empty stomach. They work better.
So the first question that Dr. Pankaj is not available here, I take the liberty as a moderator to answer that question. In hospital, it is whose responsibility? See, most of the hospitals we do not have a designated person to report, document, and reports the adverse drug reaction. Most of the hospitals. But there are hospitals where we have clinical pharmacy service. And there it is the responsibility of the clinical pharmacist to report the adverse drug reaction. So first document it. After documenting, it is sent to the nearest pharmacovigilance center. And sometimes the pharmacovigilance companies who are dealing with the pharmacovigilance, they come and directly take these reports from the hospitals, because it is the pharmaceutical companies, it is their responsibility also to submit the periodic safety update reports. But in that, anybody can do that. Even a pharmacist can do that. Nothing prevents. Yes, when we are in a system, like in a hospital, we cannot do directly, because hospital has a protocol. We have to adhere to the protocol of the hospital. But if it is the retail pharmacy, if it is an individual who is taking medicine, the consumer who finds his relative, his friends develop certain adverse drug reaction, they have the liberty to report it directly to even the National Coordination Center. No need of giving locally, it can be directly submitted to the National Coordination Center, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. And the government of India is also planning to engage the community pharmacists and their pharmacy as a center, as a pharmacovigilance center.
Hello?
Hello, Simi?
Yes, sir.
Uh,
So I think it was a fantastic session. I think it's now yeah, we can continue even after 5 p.m. It seems, the kind of response that we're getting. So, but yeah, for the sake of keeping it closing it at 4:30, we're still stretched over. What we can do is we can just have a look at the national quiz that we have been conducting
sure.
and congratulate the people here. But firstly, I think a big thanks to both the speakers, Dr. Pankaj Jain and Dr. Sathe, for the
Thank
excellent
you.
presentation. Yeah. Lots of comments about sharing your slides as well, so we can see. We will pass over the entire Excel sheet to you with the names, queries, and
Sure.
contact details. So you can
I
find
will
time
try to
for
answer
relevant
that
queries.
HCQ also, huh? Because I think
Yeah.
I've read it somewhere. I'll do that.
I think Corona is pretty much COVID-19 is a gray area where everyone is very much
Really.
relying on circumstantial evidence rather than big studies or big mechanisms. So yeah, uh, just I will if you are able to share my see my screen. So
Sure.
so we had this national quiz going around. Day one. Can you see my screen?
Yes. We
Yeah.
can.
So daily. Yesterday we had about 280 responses. Today we crossed 300 responses, and so it means that a good 30% of the audience is interacting and participating in the quiz. So the two parameters is all answers should be right, and also the time taken for answering is also a factor. So based on these two factors, these are the top 10 people who answered right and in a very short time. So and the good thing is, as you can see, even the speakers will be happy to see that there's a good mix of people from all across India.
Yes.
Yes, that is
Bangalore.
throughout India.
Yeah.
We see
That's
people from
wonderful.
New Delhi
Yeah.
to extreme south, Bangalore.
Goa, and
To
that's
Noida,
very good
Delhi,
stuff.
everywhere.
I think
Wow.
and Ansi
Great.
Verghese is one person who was also featuring yesterday in the top 3. So congratulations to Ansi, Meenakshi, Pauravi
Congratulations to every winner.
for the winner.
Yes.
Actually, not every winner, every participant.
That's very
Yes.
true, sir.
That's true. Participants, every participant I appreciate really.
So just to see what were the questions, I think the good part is that speakers today covered the three questions per topic which were asked. So if you look at the difference between an adverse event and adverse drug reaction, what is true, we saw that all ADRs are AEs, but it's not vice versa. Um, Adverse events as serious are categorized. It can be death or it can be hospitalization. And hypoglycemia due to insulin is an example of which type of ADR. So of course, it's not unexpected. It's just an augmented action of the medicine. So for insulin, it's augmented, not bizarre or chemical. So these are the right answers. For the second topic, I think this also Dr. Sadhna Sate covered very much in detail, so we need not go about it once again. So beta lactams act on cell wall. Sulfonamides are the bacteriostatic class of antibiotics, and both, in fact. So that was a bit of a trick question about the B part, why the use of antibiotics in livestock and fish farming can cause antibiotic resistance, but was, I believe, touched upon in this session that, yeah, if you are exposed to poultry and if the poultry is feeding on antibiotics, the same resistance can form. So thank you for participating. These were the questions, and many of you got them right. And of course, we have the top answers here. So that's it for the quiz and about the national quiz. So over to Dr. Mohanta for closing remarks for today. Thank you to you as well, sir.
Thank you, Sumit.
Moderating.
This session has been very, very interesting. It has been participating as well. And I could see from the questions our practicing pharmacists have raised, and that shows that how enthusiastically they have been hearing our resource person, and these questions have come out of their interest listening the resource person. So my appreciation and congratulations to all the participants, and the session have been great, and it was so great because we had two extremely sensitive and knowledgeable good speaker. Madam has spoken on antibiotics and their mechanism of action, and Dr. Pankaj has spoken on the adverse drug reaction. And on my behalf, on behalf of the Servier Pharmaceutical, I convey my heartfelt thanks to Professor Sadhana and Dr. Pankaj. Thank you once again. And my thanks goes to the Servier pharmaceutical companies and the team who are in the forefront for organizing this continuing professional development program. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.